This is Donald J. Trump, President of the United States of America. Mark Thompson is a huge loser. His show, very bad, weak, soft. But if you're interested in crap and you're a communist, you can go to edge-show.com. I don't recommend it.
You're listening to The Edge with Mark Thompson.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. This is Mark, and I always say it because it's true. I so appreciate this community of people, you among them, who tune in every week to listen, or tune in, every other week, or however often, every few weeks. Occasionally you tune in. Intermittently you subscribe. Look, if you're subscribed, you're off the hook. Let's not make this about how much you listen and how many episodes you've heard. I love that you're here now. Two conversations. We'll start with Michael Shure, our political analyst. We'll talk about everything from a huge scandal in North Carolina, which is about voter fraud. And then we get into what has blown up on Twitter as a controversy, which is Diane Feinstein's treatment of kids who descended on her office to talk about climate change and the Green New Deal. And we will surprise you, I think, because if you haven't seen the entire Diane Feinstein video, which I have seen, it's almost 15 minutes long, then you really haven't seen what happened in that office. You've seen a manipulated cut-down version, and we'll talk about that as well. Plus, the richest cat in the world is Karl Lagerfeld's cat. And we'll finish up with the scandal that has hit Robert Kraft, the New England Patriots owner, who was scooped up in a massage parlor sting. I know what you're saying. That can't possibly all be in this episode. Oh, yeah. Not only that, Jim Avila stops through. Jim Avila is the Senior National Correspondent for ABC News. He's covered multiple administrations at the White House. He has a perspective on media and news coverage and the new media environment that you have to hear. And ultimately, he has a compelling human story of how he cheated death with the help of his brother. So Jim Avila joins us as well. Thank you for all the ways you support our show. If you're shopping on Amazon, and you don't have to, but if you are going to anyway, please go through our website, edge-show.com. If you click on any episode, you'll see it says Shop Amazon or some kind of reference to Amazon. Click on that. It's the same Amazon as you would normally get, but because you're going through our site, we get a little piece of whatever you spend. We don't know what you spend. We don't know what you bought, but we do get a little something spun off to us at the end of every month. It's a great way to support the show because we do have costs. We do run in the red. Every dollar that you contribute to this show stays with this show. So producer, webmaster, all that stuff costs money. We do have a virtual tip jar. It is our PayPal tab, which you again can find on our website, edge-show.com. I think that is everything. Is that it? That is it. Once again, thanks for being here. And let's get started.
This is The Edge.
The advantage, it means.
They let guy just spit on me for no reason.
That's horrible.
Is there some comfort in uncertainty, do you think?
You're a degenerate.
Because Australian Shepherds need action.
Wow. Yeah.
This is The Edge.
That's a self-loathing term that I use.
Oh, got it.
Let's welcome him in. He's forgotten more about politics than most of us will ever know. He's Michael Shure, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you all. It's always a pleasure to be here with Mark, and the pleasure gets better because you're all here. So.
Well, Michael, with the preliminaries completed, let's jump right in. Kind of a big week in the world of politics. I care very much about something in particular. I'm going to put the environment, of course, as number one, but in this case, I'm talking about something political, and that is the vote. And one of the things that happened this week was that voter fraud, which we knew existed in North Carolina and potentially, I suppose you could say Georgia and Florida. I mean, there's voter fraud in a lot of places, but those are a couple of pockets where it's particularly bad.
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, there's not a ton of voter fraud, and it happens so infrequently that when it does happen, it glares, and this is a case of it really glaring. I mean,
that's a fair point. I guess when I'm talking about voter fraud, I'm folding in voter suppression, and that's not fair. They're two different things.
They are two different things, yeah.
Voter fraud which was what was alleged in North Carolina. And indeed, they, as a result of the investigation, revealed that there was voter fraud in North Carolina, involved a collection of absentee ballots that were then, never counted and actually forged.
Yeah, well, they were. I mean, yeah. So there's something called ballot harvesting, which is an old. It dates back to when Black people were given the vote in the South, and people would go through and get their ballots and say, we'll send these in to you, these absentee ballots, because not everybody was. A lot of people were intimidated to go down to the polls at that time to vote. So this vote harvesting thing, where they'd go door to door and they'd get your absentee ballots and say, we'll send them in. Of course, they wouldn't send them in, or they'd change them, but usually not send them in. Anyway, this guy, McCrae Dowless in North Carolina, did this in this congressional race. It was not just alleged, it was proven. There are witnesses and eyewitnesses, and it was a race for the 9th District in North Carolina, a race I covered, actually, and I interviewed this guy, Mark Harris. He's a pastor, a Baptist pastor, and a nice guy. And he beat, on election night, Dan McCready by 905 votes. And no one is saying that there were necessarily 905 votes that were harvested. Nobody really knows. But somebody who worked for his campaign did this, and he claimed not to know anything about it. Then his son came and took the stand in this trial when they never certified the results of the election. North Carolina didn't. And his son came and took the stand and said, I told my dad to be careful of this guy. And then all of a sudden, Mark Harris said, you know what, maybe this was a flawed election. So it was his acquiescence at the end that made this go away, and now they're going to have a new election there.
Testimony from his son that you're talking about was tear-filled and emotion-filled. It was quite a dramatic moment in this entire process.
Yeah, his son's a U.S. attorney, and he told the truth. And I don't think, this is a defense of Harris in some respects. I don't think Harris, I think Harris obviously wants to be in Congress. He thinks that he won fairly. And I think that testimony finally, the gravity of the situation finally registered with him when he saw his U.S. attorney's son. Harris himself is a veteran, served the country. His son is a member of the Justice Department. I think that was enough, and I think he said, okay, maybe this happened, this wasn't fair, and I'm going to do the right thing. I think he deserves a commendation in the end. Whether or not he ordered it, that was never alleged, nor was it proven. It's just that this was a tainted election. North Carolina realized it, and then it was fixed.
Yeah, this guy you're talking about working for Harris was doing just that, working for Harris. So you're saying that, in a way, Harris's fingerprints aren't on it, beyond the fact that he hired this guy and he did this thing.
Right. And by the way, he may have been ordered to do it. He may have known about it. He may not be telling the truth about it. But in the end, he said, we got to have another election. And I think he gets a little bit of credit for that.
It is odd, though, that this guy whose staffer, let's call it what it is, was involved in an aggressive fraud.
Right.
Involving the election.
Blatant and unabashed.
And when you start collecting ballots and then changing them and not sending them in,
right,
all of these things, that is to subvert an election, to subvert the people's voice. So it's weird. And again, I understand that Harris himself didn't collect them, but this other guy did. And as you say, maybe Harris didn't order it. He just hired this guy despite repeated warnings about this guy from his son. That was what was discussed on the
son calling him shady.
Right. And so it is odd to me, though, that he is permitted, of course, in the re-election, they're going to run it again.
They have to, but they're not going to just run it again. There's going to be a primary. So Mark Harris beat Robert Pittenger. I hope people are still listening because now it's getting dull. But Pittenger was a sitting member of Congress. He beat him in a primary and then went on to the general. Now Pittenger could come back and win that primary again and sort of settle things finally there. Or Dan McCready, who was the Democrat, could win in a general.
I'm just saying that it's so weird to see this guy who's created this whole thing now back in the election process. But, as you say, maybe he's not.
Maybe he's not. And this gives the voters a chance to say, all right, you know what, we're not enough of it. But I think in the end, very few don't go down kicking and screaming, and he was the one who really made this end.
Again, when we talk about votes, I just have to always say I don't understand, and I'll never understand, a bunch of things about U.S. government and voting, but first and foremost, why it's not a national holiday. It should be. It is elsewhere. It is ridiculous that voting takes place on a Tuesday. At minimum, it should be over 2 days, and one of them should be a weekend.
Right. There's no question about it. And early voting does not change that because Election Day is still Election Day in this country, and even though early early voting does help people to vote in places where it's not, banned. I do think you're right. They can't. This Tuesday was selected because it was market day. People would take their things to market. That was when you could vote in the city. That's a totally different economy from a totally different century, and the time has come to definitely change that. I think it'll happen a bit.
Now, I'd like to say something just on that, which I'm sure I'll be struck down by some constitutional lightning, but the Constitution, when you say things like that, like it was Tuesday because Tuesday was market day, and that's when people brought, it just reminds me of how we revere the Constitution, as perhaps we should to a degree, the way born-agains revere the Bible, but then they take it literally and shape it to their lives now, such that if you have it on Tuesday, a lot of people who have to work and go to a lot of trouble to vote may not be able to make it. And in a way, that's voter suppression. So anyway.
Agreed. Listen, our Constitution was written by people who owned slaves, right? I mean, they were brilliant men, all of them, and it's an incredible and enduring document that has needed to be changed and needs some things changed yet. And I don't know that Tuesday is in the Constitution, but it may be. I think that just may be law, congressional law.
Here's something from the Trump administration. There's so much you don't hear reported because the media oxygen is taken up with the Mueller investigation and the Manafort sentencing. And these are things that are important, but there are other things going on. And as I've always argued from the very start, when people are saying, well, Trump's not getting anything done because Trump's getting a lot of stuff done.
A lot.
And the Trump administration said that it's going to bar organizations that provide abortion referrals from receiving federal family planning money. So that's millions of dollars that'll be stripped away from Planned Parenthood, for example.
Correct, yeah.
And it can be redirected, that money, toward religiously based anti-abortion groups. And so all of it,
probably a wall.
That's right. In a world where you're looking for money, there's some.
Right.
So there's stuff going on. I mean, that's a conservative shift.
It is. And these things that are going on, it's almost like you build a bigger ballpark and then you change the rules on home runs, right? So with the judiciary being shaped by the conservatives, they totally change the playing field, and then they start putting in new plays, and then there's no way to defend against them. And that's how they're changing. So this is an idea that probably germinated a while ago, but now the courts are in such a position that when that idea is put forward now, it's a totally different conversation.
And that's the point, that if you want to challenge it in court, now you've got a conservative court that is just not going to allow you to have any success in that challenge. Right. Michael, something happened here, and I'm usually the one who's more emotional about things, and you're the kind of guy who goes, well, remember, this is this, and so, you're a calming influence on me. Now let me be the, hey, everybody just chill out for a second guy, and you tell me if I'm right. There's a big thing on Twitter, and has a virality now that it's trending right now as we have this conversation, about Diane Feinstein.
She's a senator, senior senator from California.
Thank you. A bunch of kids, and these are really young kids. I don't know, what would you say, 7 and
I would say
11?
10 and 11 or 10, something like that.
And they had prepared this document asking for her to vote yes on the Green New Deal. And they all went into her office. She came out. I thought it was quite nice. She came out. She listened. She responded that she didn't feel as though the Green New Deal was the right legislation to suggest, because it doesn't have any chance of passage.
She tried to give a little civics lesson, saying the reason I don't think it's right is because we have a Republican Senate that can't pass it.
Right. And then they said, really through the adults who were there, that everyone was reemphasizing the urgency of the problem of climate change. Everyone was making the point that they recognize how it's their future on the line. But the adults were saying, even if you don't think it will pass, we feel you should vote yes because it sends a message. It sends a message to the world. It sends a message to us. So again, this went on for a while. It was like a 15-minute interchange, and I didn't feel as though she was dismissive. I understand. She gave them copies of her Green New Deal, if you will, her proposed legislation. And that's a summary of what happened. It blew up.
Well, it blew up, but we should say that there was a cut-down version that the Sunrise Foundation tweeted out, probably Instagrammed. I don't have Instagram, but probably Instagrammed out, that did make it seem as if the senator was being dismissive and curt and not endearing herself to these kids, right? But when you saw the longer version, it did change my mind to a degree on this, and it made it seem exactly like you're saying. Is that she was just giving, this is what I'm doing. And listen, she was also being interrupted by the kids and also the teacher, and it seemed by the end to me that these were a bunch of kids being used as mouthpieces by the teacher. Even though I agree with the Green New Deal, and I agree with the kids, and I agree with the teacher, the way that they approached it, I thought was unfortunate in that it really seemed like they were just there speaking on behalf of their teacher and putting forth what she was saying. And Feinstein, she wasn't warm and cuddly, but that's not her job either. She was trying to explain to them, this is my legislation. You're going to take a look at it. Asked her aide to go print it out to give to all of them. Came out in the first place. I don't know. It didn't strike me as bad as some people are saying in its virality.
I did not see the cut down version, but I guess that was pretty rude. I went right to the 15-minute, the complete video, and I think this is much ado about nothing.
Yeah.
I thought she was quite indulgent, actually, with her attention, her time. I didn't feel she was dismissive, period. That's it. Look, and I very much support the Green New Deal, and I also understand when you talk about zero emissions and I want to be carbon-free by whatever date. These are goals. It's the same way you put down tax legislation. It's going to be negotiated.
I want to go to the moon. That's what JFK said. He was dead and buried by the time we went to the moon. I mean, this is the kind of thing where you have that conversation. The first people to talk about gay marriage, it took years. The first people to talk about the black vote, it takes years. It actually takes less time now. Gay marriage had a much shorter gestation period than civil rights did. And, there will be something about this. Healthcare, all of it takes a while, and it takes a while because senators know, Diane Feinstein knows, listen, we got to get something here through the Senate because the Green New Deal is not going to pass. There are some people who say put the Green New Deal up there, let it die, and then bring it back later. A perfectly valid way of doing it. That's not Diane Feinstein. She wants to put in some climate change legislation that will appeal to her colleagues on the other side.
What about Mitch McConnell, who wants to vote on the Green New Deal? He says that he wants to vote on it.
Well, he says he does because he thinks it will hurt Democrats because it seems extreme because it was proposed by
AOC.
By sort of a very Democratic, liberal, progressive wing of the House. So he thinks you put it up there and you get people to vote for it, then you run against those people and you say that they're way out there. I mean, he's a tactician. That's probably a good tactic.
Michael, we move to something that struck us as particularly odd. It's always sad when the world loses someone who's made such a huge contribution in the world of fashion. It's Karl Lagerfeld, who died this week.
That's right.
And Choupette, Choupette, which is French for sweetheart, has historically lived a lavish lifestyle with Karl Lagerfeld. Well, you're saying, well, what's the problem with that? I would imagine that Lagerfeld left some money for Choupette, and you would be right. In fact, he left $300 million. Choupette is a cat. It is Karl Lagerfeld's cat.
Right. Who, by the way, I just started dating. A, obviously this is outrageous, but B, Karl Lagerfeld had $300 million is an unbelievable thing to me. Wasn't he just a fashion designer?
Just a fashion designer?
I understand. He was fashion designer at Chanel. He was the most legendary fashion designer. If you told me he was worth $60 million, I would say, wow, hey, yeah, I should have been a fashion designer. That sounds great. And that would have been believable. $300 million is what, Mitt Romney's worth $300 million.
I love that that's the benchmark.
That's
the gold standard for wealth.
And we talked about him being untouchable.
If you're going to be hundreds of millions of dollars, you should be a hedge fund manager.
But what I'm saying is
corporate raider.
We equate that, or you should be an Oakland Raider, right? But not Karl Lager. I was surprised, but you obviously weren't.
I wasn't because, look, Karl Lagerfeld is not just designing fashion. Of course, he has his own fashion lines. He has fragrances. He has so many things that are associated with his name through the years that you do, like Ralph Lauren and like Gianni Versace and like all of these people who are names. They start as fashion designers, but they become a brand. Exactly.
Yeah, I guess so. I was astonished by it because that also implies that there was more because he didn't leave everything to the cat. Right.
Not at all.
It was just a lot more money than I thought this guy had.
I mean, the most money left a cat is probably going to be that which is left to Choupette because Blackie was a British cat. Left $9.15 million by his owners.
That.
Yeah, and that was 1988, so even if you adjust, let's call it 19.15.
Right,
Still doesn't.
Still, he's an alley cat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was a German Shepherd. The dogs are a different category because people sometimes they feel a greater connection or whatever. I mean, the reigning record holder is a German Shepherd.
Of course it'd be a German Shepherd. All that Nazi money and the pillaging. Right.
And also a bunch of paintings that were looted from the Jews.
Right. Yeah,
That's great. They're both, you got the money and the paintings.
Yeah, exactly.
And his name was Gunther.
Right.
And Gunther, the richest animal ever. The dog inherited $375 million in 1991 from the German Countess Carlotta Liebenstein.
Now, does Gunther then what happens to Gunther's wealth once Gunther passes?
Well, these are the things that are the ongoing questions. Do they go into, I'm guessing that there's a coterie of hangers-on. Who,
because cats notoriously have many relatives. So it's, how many in a litter, not to mention 9 lives. That money is not going to go very far. What a disgusting thing, though, because that's so much money that could have gone to so many places. And to leave it, to make a point or to be cute or whatever, leave $100,000 for the rest of the cat's life and let it live well and extravagantly, and then you have $299.9 million that you could leave to charity or people or foundations.
Sure, and that may happen. Yeah. And that may happen. To be fair, this is the headline grabber. But I will say that Choupette is not a ne'er-do-well, not a trust fund kid. That's what I'm trying.
Well, he is now.
No, because Choupette makes more money than both of us, Michael, on his own without Karl Lagerfeld. $3 million a year.
How does that happen?
Through sponsorships and ad appearances. And I keep calling him because I like Choupette as a him, but it's a her.
Yeah.
Choupette is a girl. So she has her own little fortune.
Which is encouraging.
I wonder who she's leaving that to.
Well, again, that's...
there could be a lot.
There's a lot.
A lot of jockeying for that.
Right.
Last thing is Robert Kraft was picked up in that massage parlor sting.
Yeah.
Robert Kraft is the owner of the New England Patriots. I guess he was a repeat customer at this massage parlor, which is in a strip mall in Florida. I mean, it's kind of like you don't expect to see billionaires rolling in and out of there.
No, I guess not. I'm discomfited by this. Like, I don't think this is...
It's not news.
...my business.
Yeah.
I don't know. If the massage parlor's breaking the law and they want to close the place down because there are reports that happened, fine. To know that they were videoing people going in there and to then release the names of the people, I think that's terrible, and I can't stand the Patriots and all of that. But I don't know. I get no pleasure out of seeing this story.
I understand and tend to agree with what you're saying on one level. Those who worry about human trafficking and because that's what this was, a human trafficking investigation, would say, well, the way to get people to stop going to these things is to expose the names of the Johns. That's what they've done in local newspapers across the country.
But this isn't about not going. I think that obviously you can't sell drugs if there aren't drug users, but you also, this is the people that sponsor.
Public humiliation.
Yeah, this is about public humiliation. I don't think you'd do it this way. I don't have the cure for it, but I don't think, and human trafficking is a serious and heinous crime, but I don't know that you're going to, win friends this way. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this is a deterrent.
You're never wrong, Mike. I don't want to hear you ever say that again. Now,
never mind.
Do you know where Robert Kraft made his money? He's got billions of dollars.
Real estate, I'm guessing.
That's always a good guess.
Yeah.
He made his money in paper. He graduated from Harvard Business School. Again, never a bad move.
Mm-mm.
He began his career with the Rand Whitney Group, which is a paper packaging company owned by his father-in-law.
Oh, look at that.
Again, never a bad move to work for your father.
No, it's not. Right.
Then he acquired a controlling stake in the company through a leveraged buyout.
Right.
There you go.
Then he became Karl Lagerfeld's pet.
So he founded International Forest Products. That trades forest product commodities and like container board and pulp, things that are used for paper. And then he grew his paper and packaging conglomerate to become one of the largest exporters in North America. And then he started the Kraft Group. That was a holding company for other businesses and so on. Then they got into real estate development, as you say, private equity, funding and all the rest. Once you get big money, it gets bigger money, right?
Right, of course. Right.
And then...
it just proves that no matter how wealthy you are, you still want a hand job.
Ladies and gentlemen, Michael Shure!
Thank you all. Thanks very much. Thank you.
Wow!
Hello, this is Morgan Freeman, and I want to thank you so much for all the ways that you support my friends on The Edge with Mark Thompson. You know, you can listen on iTunes, Stitcher, Overcast, iHeartRadio, and many places that great podcasts are heard. That's an oxymoron, by the way. Great podcasts. Or you can go to their website, edge-show.com. Well, still haven't purchased a new domain name, I see.
Subscribe to The Edge on iTunes or on Stitcher. Join us on the web at edge-show.com.
Jim Avila is here, Senior National Correspondent for ABC. He's covered the White House, and you're just the guy to talk to about one of the things that's the most troubling aspect of politics and events that are covered in the media today, and that is just how you ride herd over all this information and cut through all the disinformation, which seems as though it's coming at us in ways that it never was before.
It is totally different. As you said, I covered the Obama years in the White House, and not just at ABC, but all over. I mean, you know, so we have a half an hour newscast at 6:30, and then the morning show, which the first half an hour is hard news. And it used to be that we were lucky to get one political story on in each of those places because there wasn't that interest. There wasn't the controversy, the total everyday flow of misinformation coming out of the White House. So, in fact, you know, many people in the news industry thought Obama was boring. In fact, Obama liked being called No Drama Obama. So it's totally different. From when I was covering it then, we were trying to drum up stories. We had time to actually look into things and investigate things. And I broke the Cuba, United States coming back together story because I didn't have to be at the White House briefing every day. I could actually go out and talk to contacts and sources. So it's totally different. Now it's more like you're standing in front of a fire hose and trying to manage that flow of information and largely disinformation or misinformation is the real challenge.
When you are given information that you know is wrong, the press secretary for whomever proffers some fact, either about immigration or maybe about the debt or it may be whatever, about some new piece of legislation, the White House has always had their own spin on stuff. But how do you report something from a White House that seems pretty committed to, well, to not representing the truth a lot of the time? Or, you know, calling black white, calling red blue.
Right.
You know.
Well, I think the key part in covering the Trump administration for a reporter is to be prepared. You cannot go into the White House briefing room without backup information about what you're going to ask. You have to realize that they're either not going to answer or they're going to come back at you with what many times are lies. And you just have to call them that. They're lies. And so you have to, and this is the challenge for White House reporters, and I'm friends with I'm still in the White House Correspondent Association. They're still friends. That if you go to ask Sarah something, you have to be more prepared about the follow-up question than you do the initial question. The initial question is just the opening. After that, you have to have your facts down, you have to have it written down, and be able to say, but wait, that's not true, because you're going to get that. Now, you didn't really have to, did the Obama people spin? Yeah, they were spinning. That's what everybody does. It was rare. I'm not saying it didn't happen. It was rare when they would boldface lie. There are some people who believe that Obama lied about being able to keep your own doctor. He says that's a nuance. People label that a lie. But you can actually pick out the one or two times that I remember where there was a lie. Instead, what you had was them trying to explain and put the best spin on whatever was going on. That's different than the bald-faced lie.
What's the protocol at the White House? You're in that briefing room. First of all, that seems like at once a glamorous job because of the importance of what you're reporting on, but also just a brutal job. Like you're there at the White House every day, waiting in that briefing room. My question is about protocol, and then I want you just to give me a quick 30 seconds on what that's like being in the White House press corps. But just for protocol's sake, when you talk about a follow-up question, is every reporter given a question and a follow-up?
Not every reporter is, because there's a lot of reporters. So if you work for a major broadcast network or cable network, you sit in the first row. And also Reuters, UPI, sit in the first row. Second row is the New York Times, Washington Post, those type of folks. USA Today, Wall Street Journal, national newspapers. Those people normally get a question. Now, in fact, during the Obama years, and I mean before that in Bush years, there was a real protocol where it started every day with the AP reporter. The AP reporter got the first question. This is a matter of tradition and history. And then they would go down the line, not necessarily in order, and they usually mixed it up of the front row. And they'd finish the front row, and then they'd go to the second row. And then after that, it was sort of a free-for-all about who got called on. If you were called on, you usually got one question and a follow-up, maybe even a second follow-up. If you know, they're pretty. If they didn't answer the question and you were able to say, wait a minute, you didn't answer this part, they were responsive. Josh Earnest was a responsive guy. You know, I'm not saying he didn't spin, but he would answer your question. And you could say to him, Josh, you didn't answer my question. And he would go, okay, and then give it another shot. Today, they changed the rules. The rules are totally different than they have been ever. What's different about that, about the Trump administration? They changed rules and everything. Some people think that's good. Now, frequently, no longer does AP get the first question. Frequently, Fox gets the first question. Frequently, Breitbart might get the first question. Some right-wing organization might get the first question, and they get called on much more than they ever did before.
Are the questions like, would you term the Trump presidency stupendous or phenomenal? Is that how they get things going every day now?
Pretty much, like that. Although, I have to say John Roberts is...
yeah, he's the Fox guy now.
He's a Fox guy. He's pretty straight.
He's from
I have
CBS and CNN.
Yeah, I have... everybody has their opinion. And, I think that it's hard not to reflect in some way the organization you work for. And he works for a biased organization, so it's hard for him not to be somewhat tainted by that. But, like Shepard Smith, who sometimes stands up and says, wait a minute, on their network, he does do that on occasion. So you have to give it to him. But
so they kick it off, Breitbart and Fox, and then after that, it's just a rugby scrum?
Pretty much. It's a rugby. You're calling for attention.
I want to just drop back to what you were saying, which is now it's different. I think it's really different now. They're not even doing daily briefings.
Right. I mean, the daily briefing, first of all, is a thing of the past. It's about once a month now. And usually her trick now is she doesn't come out on her own. She comes out with Bolton or with Pompeo or somebody who has a message they want to deliver. They deliver that message, you ask them some questions, and then Sarah will step to the mic afterwards and take a couple questions, so it limits her exposure, limits her vulnerability, because she has very little credibility among the White House press corps anymore, very little. I mean, and I'm told, remember I'm not there anymore, but I'm told that off camera, she gives out much straighter information and she's much better to talk to if you can get back there and talk to her. But when she's in front of the mic, it's useless.
And that off-camera stuff, she speaks on the record, or is that on background?
Both.
Okay. I'm going to say one thing that's disappointed me about the press in those press rooms right now I'm talking about, is they've succumbed, it seems to me, to some of the theater of this media age and this Trumpian revolution of political media. And by that I mean they ask questions like, this is an actual question I heard. Sarah, will the president be honest when he's asked questions about the connections to the campaign and Russia? And I'm thinking, what do you expect to get from that question? Do you think that she's going to say, well, we certainly hope he'll be honest? I mean, he tends to not really be honest a lot of the time. Do you think Sarah Sanders is going to say that? Or, I mean, what response are you looking for? It seems like a wasted question. And yet I saw it because the question gets that reporter in the news cycle,
Right. I think, you're right. There's a couple things to watch here, and even in the Obama administration, we complained a lot, so the broadcast networks don't carry the briefing, so they don't carry it live. I'm talking about ABC, NBC, CBS. So the reporters there, the correspondents there, including myself, really are. It sounds a little self-serving. We are really seeking information for stories we might be doing at 6:30. We're not looking for the conflict question. Okay? Now, the cable channels carry it live. So they want to be seen asking a question that will interest their viewers and maybe cause some conflict, maybe some fireworks. They also, what was troubling to me when I was in there during the Obama years was that the same question would be asked over and over because that correspondent needed to be seen asking that question in their clip for their show.
I see.
So they might be asking the same thing over and over and over again, or a very. So is it a good thing to have? It all goes back to the basic question: is it a good thing to have the briefing on live television? It wasn't always. It was just started in the Bush administration. There's some problems with it, but overall, I think it does show those in the American public who want to see for themselves, unfiltered, what goes on at the White House as far as honesty and that kind of thing. They can see it live. Are there abuses? Yes. There are questions that are asked that are only asked for the sake of the question and not the sake of the answer, and that's what you're hitting on.
Right.
That happens, and you, as a viewer, you just have to recognize that's what's going on.
I'm going to move out of the White House in a second, but just because I promised everybody, and I am curious, that White House press corps, what is that like? I know you were all over the world with Obama. I remember seeing your pieces from everywhere because you have to follow the president. But your daily routine is to be at the White House, right?
Yeah, and it's shared duties. I was sharing with Jonathan Karl, so you do have some relief. It's not like you're there from morning until evening. One of us would usually do the Good Morning America, and so we'd be there early at 6, and the other would do the World News, which you're done at 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock.
Is there camaraderie? Is there competition? Is it like
there's both?
Okay,
there's both. There's a feeling of we're all in this together, but there's not sharing of sources or information. You're still competing, and you still want to break that story. I have to tell you, being part of the White House press corps is the greatest honor in journalism. It was a bucket list item for me. I asked my bosses, who at the time were, pleased with what I was doing, this is something I want to do before I leave the business. And they were gracious and gave me the job. And every day I walked in the front door, and you walk to that Secret Service thing, and you have a White House hard pass, and you walk and you're looking at the White House. If you have any patriotism at all in you, and I do, it's a great feeling. So any complaints are minor. You're at the top of your profession. You're where the news is being made, where the world really is being altered. That's a great feeling. Are the accommodations great? No. I mean, my office at the ABC News Bureau was 5 times the size of the White House booth. So when I had to go to the White House booth, I'm sharing it. It's about the size of a dining room table, and there's 4 other people from our staff are in that same room: a radio correspondent, another correspondent, a couple producers, and you're shoulder to shoulder all day long.
This is why you're writing pieces and filing them.
When you're writing and you're calling sources, and you might step out to call a source because even amongst your comrades, you don't necessarily share all that information. So that's great. You don't sit in the briefing. Most people don't sit in the briefing room. You have almost every organization that covers the White House has a little spot, a desk, it's very crowded because it's not luxurious. So you have a booth. So they're sitting there doing your work at those. And then when the White House briefing is supposed to happen, then you go in and sit in your spot. There are assigned spots, and then there are spots that are not assigned at the very back of the room, which if you don't have an assigned spot, you fight for.
And those people at the back of the room, they just have to be assertive and shout their question out, or because they don't really get called on a lot, I don't
Right,
think.
and it used to be, and I don't know how they work it now, to tell you the truth, but it used to be, so if you were a person who wasn't regularly there or isn't regularly called upon, you could send a note, an email to Josh Earnest or to one of his staff and say, I have a particular question today about this that nobody else is going to ask, and it's important for my story. And they would accommodate. They would call on you. And so that's how they would make that happen. And the perks are, let me just talk about the perks just for a second, okay? So because everybody, yes, it's a pain in the butt half the time, but the perks are amazing. I mean, you fly in Air Force One. Okay, you're
at the back of Air Force One.
There's a space of about maybe 16 seats, maybe less, maybe 10 seats, and the press pool, which rotates. So once every 5 times in the television pool, an ABC correspondent will get to ride on Air Force One, and almost every flight, the president or the press secretary comes back and talks off the record. That's you're talking to the most powerful person in the world in an intimate setting, with 3 other reporters. That's an incredible perk. You're eating off White House china. In the Christmas season, they've eliminated this now. They had this huge, beautiful party in the White House. You're in the East Room with all the media celebrity people, and the president. And then the president and his wife stand up by the Christmas tree and take pictures with every White House correspondent and his date or his child or her child. You know, those are things that I'll savor forever. That was a great period of time, and that you shouldn't feel sorry in any way for a White House correspondent.
Right. Just because you mentioned it, the party and, of course, the White House Correspondents' Dinner, which has now become this sort of larger-than-life, almost Academy Awards type, including a red carpet and all this sort of thing event. I see a virtue in getting cozy with sources and a familiarity with even those who you have to treat in sort of an adversarial way. When you're the media, you have to treat the president and you have to treat the administration, regardless, Democrat or Republican, in a somewhat adversarial fashion. You have to question those things and pieces of information that you're given. But I see the virtue in the Christmas party, and I even see the virtue in, cozying up in one way or another. It did seem, particularly with the White House Correspondents' Dinner, that we'd reached some kind of critical mass that was now making it wrong, where it seemed as though it was too much of a show. Like, I don't mean when I say you guys, I know you're not there anymore, but where the media covering the president and the administration is now so interwoven with that administration and president, and access is so important. I don't see how they separate themselves. And so I kind of turned on the White House Correspondents' Dinner as a bad thing. Set me straight on all that.
Well, like everything, it's not black and white. It is good to have, if you can, friendly relationships with your sources, with people who are your sources. So you're not really going to the White House Correspondents Association dinner as a reporter to get friendly with the president. You don't sit next to the president. The president's up on the dais. You don't get any contact with him. The way ABC uses it, and the way most networks use it, is we buy tables. We buy 2 or 3 tables. Each correspondent is allowed to bring a guest. We bring our sources. We bring, when I was covering the FAA and the FDA, I brought the head of the FDA. I brought they don't get to go to those things. And that little perk meant when I called, they answered the phone. Is that valuable? It is very valuable. That's how we used it. I like the comedian. I like the last comedian. I thought she was funny, and I think you need to have a sense of humor, Yeah.
But
Obama was hilarious.
Obama was hilarious, and many point to that as like the moment that Trump said, "I'm going to get
Absolutely.
that guy."
Yeah, and that was the moment that Trump decided to run for president. Yeah. So is it hard today to have it? It is, because there is animus with this president that there never has been. You can blame the press for that, or you can blame the president for it. I blame the president for it. We're not calling him the enemy of the people. So, it would be hypocritical, I think, to continue to have that format where the president actually came. I'm glad he doesn't come, because it would be hypocritical for us to welcome him like we welcomed the other president. We welcomed, it wasn't just Obama. I know that people think it's either black or white on that. George Bush came to that. He was funny too.
And this is the point when it comes to these guys, that the other presidents who've been there, they're put in the griddle like it's a Friars Club roast virtually. And when I say that, I mean their policies are laid bare. And for example, the Obama drone program. I think it was Colbert who did jokes. Maybe Kimmel did jokes. I forget all the different comedians during his time, but there were many. And it was bam, bam, bam. They attacked him on drone policy. They attacked him on Wall Street bailouts. They really did. They went after legitimate policy problems. Similarly with George Bush, with the war in Iraq going on. So, but you're right, I think, if your notion that the divisiveness has now become so intense, and that you can't vet someone who's calling you the enemy of the people.
Right. This administration is different in many ways. The first the reason that we talked about it already is that it lies. The job of the press is to challenge the powerful when they lie to the American people. I always viewed it as being a friendly adversary. Did I challenge? Look, people always complain that we didn't challenge Obama. I stood up at a press conference after Syria used chemical weapons and asked President Obama if he felt some blame for that because he did not go after Syria the first time. They hated that question. I don't care. But the difference was that Secretary Rice, who was on the trip with us at the time, didn't have dinner with us that night. She was so mad. So what?
Right.
The next week we were fine. Everybody was back to realizing that's our job, that's their job. They had to be challenged. The difference is today, because it's so frequent, that wouldn't happen every time. I didn't ask him a question like that every time because it was infrequent. But now it happens every day. The Washington Post, which tracks these things, says he lies, 6 times a day on average. So that he doesn't like it when we point that out. So we have become not the enemy of the people, but certainly his enemy.
I want to leave that world and now talk about the media environment generally, because I think also we've gone through some big changes from a media standpoint. Some of those changes have been slow and have just been evolving through the decades. By that, I'm talking about the digital empire that's grown, all the different outlets digitally that are becoming part of media and reporting and the culture of politics. And we've also seen audiences diminish in traditional mainstream media like television and radio. Now has been joined by podcasts like this one and BuzzFeed, Politico. They're all relevant. And newspapers are really the big thing, I think, that are just cratering right now. They're unable to maintain their old business model.
Except the Washington Post and the New York Times.
Right. Washington Post
are thriving.
They're really flourishing. Trump. Yeah. So give me your state of the state on the media and politics and news as represented by all of these different outlets and this changing space?
Well, it's important, I think, to do your research. And the problem is on Twitter and on Facebook, there's just, again, a fire hose of information. The first thing I look at is not the headline, but the source. You have to find sources that you trust and that have earned your trust and that have standards, okay? So if you look at my either Facebook or Twitter feed, I don't retweet anything unless it's from ABC, who I trust, obviously, because I work for them. I know the process. I know the standards. I know that every article that goes on our website or on our broadcast goes through a standards and legal department. Everything. So it has to be judged as being well-sourced. The New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, USA Today, the major news sources. Do I read others? I read some BuzzFeed stuff. I trust Politico to a great extent. I will sometimes retweet them. BuzzFeed is gray area. It really is. I mean, it's great, and I don't want to sound like an old man, but I am an old man, and BuzzFeed has a lot of young journalists, okay? It takes experience to cover politics in today's age in the White House. We'll see whether or not they were right or wrong about President Trump directly directing Cohen to lie to Congress. We'll see. It may be, but it's really unusual for Mueller to come out and say that's wrong.
Although that's not what he didn't say that's wrong. He said there's certain aspects of the story.
So we have to see what's wrong.
Right, okay.
But so they made a mistake. That's not the end of the world. We'll have to see how it turns out. I mean, as it's been pointed out, Woodward and Bernstein made a mistake during the Watergate. And eventually it turned out that, it wasn't as big a mistake as we thought at the beginning.
The New York Times made a mistake in the run-up to the Iraq War.
Well,
right?
We all did. Everybody did. That was, one of our worst episodes. And I have to say, I wasn't at ABC at the time. I was at NBC at the time. And Peter Jennings did a better job of being skeptical than anybody else on television, and he was on ABC. Everybody else was kind of, it's going to happen. There are WMDs there. We're kind of getting off track, but
no, but it's a fair point.
Yeah. So, the most important thing for me is not to. Don't read everything. Don't believe everything. Because especially these, they're filling you with misinformation on purpose. Look at what it says. If the website that's coming from is patriotsforamerica.org, the chances are it's wrong. And there's similar things for the left. I'm not saying it's all the right. But
first of all, it would be patriotsforamerica.com, not .org.
Okay, right. So you have to, mainstream media has standards. You may not agree with them, and there's a great portion of the public nowadays who doesn't like what we say. That's your prerogative, but you can't attack the standards. The standards are, journalistic standards are black and white. We have to have two sources on something. If one of our sources is wrong, we say the source was wrong. If we make a mistake, we come back and correct it prominently and immediately. Those are our standards. Not everybody has that, and a lot of people their standard is they're trying to disrupt, and they're trying to, the stuff I see on here is just, It's like an Onion article, half the time. It's
just a headline, clickbait. You read
right.
it, and you're saying they're just.
Right. You're wasting your time. Don't. If you really are serious, and maybe you're not. If you're just in it for the entertainment, then read all that stuff, and it's entertainment. But remember, it's entertainment. If you really want to know what's going on, then NPR's got a great website. They're straight. They're good. They have great veteran reporters. The networks all do. NBC. CBS, ABC.
But you look at Mother Jones or even Politico, which does some great investigative stuff. I mean, where it's not just the news cycle of the last day, where some working sources has had to go into that.
Mother
the
Jones,
Atlantic, thank you.
Those are great sources. And I read Mother Jones, but you have to realize that Mother Jones is from the left.
Sure.
So just read it with that understanding. When Mother Jones breaks something, here's the other key. When something like BuzzFeed or Mother Jones even, or a smaller digital organization breaks something, watch and see if it's followed by the other major networks or if they confirm it. The BuzzFeed article on Trump and Cohen was not, and it was pinned on BuzzFeed. Anybody who reported it in the major mainstream pinned it on BuzzFeed. BuzzFeed is reporting. What you want to hear is the New York Times has confirmed a BuzzFeed report that this or that is happening. That will tell you that more than one organization has actually found this out from their own sources, and then you can more or less depend on it. But when an organization, even like Mother Jones, is out on its own, and believe me, when they break something, everybody else is trying to follow and trying to find out if that's true, checking with their sources. So if there's a deafening silence, if there's crickets and nobody's backing that up, then you got to think, wait a minute, maybe that's not all the way true, or there's some problem with that article. That's a one key. But I'm not saying don't read. I read Mother Jones, and I read, I read some right-wing stuff too. Not as much, but I do read some of it because I also want to know. A lot of times I'll tune in Fox after something just to see what they're saying about how can they possibly say anything positive about this, and I want to see what they're saying.
No, I watch them too. I think you have to watch them and read right-wing. I'll go through a lot of Drudge stuff because I know that he'll click me to these right-wing places. I think you do have to be aware of all this. I really hate it when facts are perverted. You know what I mean? I understand perspective, but when facts are perverted, I really have a problem with that. But yeah. I guess that's
one of the things that the viewers and audience readers and that kind of thing need to also differentiate, which they frequently don't, and it's because it's confusing, is an opinion article versus a fact article. And in the mainstream, they'll label it as such. The New York Times will say opinion or perspective or that kind of thing. And that's your key that, okay, this is more than just a factual article. This is something different.
Why don't things that are, I would consider wildly scandalous, of the sort that, for example, Jared Kushner was looking for before the president actually took office, a private communication back channel to the Russians, not even using U.S. communications so that they could have open communications without any U.S. interference or monitoring. That evolved to, in the White House, Kushner had so many foreign conflicts, has so many foreign conflicts that he couldn't originally get security clearance. I touched on this on this show a couple episodes ago, but I guess what I'm getting at is that story seems huge to me, since he is, the closest person to the president, arguably, or certainly among them. That's just one of them. Wilbur Ross having to update his conflicts and his holdings, not remembering a bunch of things. And then Zinke, who's just left as head of Interior, now going to be replaced by a coal lobbyist. And this strikes me as a big story. Yet it's not even mentioned because Russia takes all of the oxygen out of the newscast and the news cycle.
Well, I think those things are mentioned. They don't pick up, the buzz that others do because they're, look, Trump himself sucks a lot of the oxygen out. He is a reality performer. He knows how to try to divert us and how to grab our attention.
He'll call Chuck Schumer a name, Nancy Pelosi, whatever, and then we're off on that.
Absolutely. Some of this, to remember, is that we do have to service our readers or our viewers, and our viewers are attracted by that. So there's some of that going on, okay? And there's always...
By him, you mean? When you say attracted by that, what are you talking about? What's the
They're
that?
attracted by the story,
okay.
By whatever this name-calling it's currently going on.
Okay.
They want to hear more about it, so they're going to go to whoever's reporting about it. So we have to respond to that. There's always been a debate between should we provide the news people need to have or the news people want to have, and you have to go down the middle of the line. today, the reason no other president has gotten the attention that this president has, and it's because he knows how to do it. You know, he knows what to say to divert us. And why do we not hear about we should be hearing more about Jared Kushner. We don't hear about him as much because it's there. The story is there on the website, but the latest thing is on Twitter, right? I mean, we don't continue to cycle that thing we did about Kushner that was a 3-page article. We instead, the latest thing, the cycle itself pushes that out of our consciousness. But if you're looking for it, you can find it. It's there. That's how you know about it.
I'm reminded of the New York Times piece, which didn't even run that long ago, which was a huge investigation into the Trump organization and Trump family and how they, in essence, had been skirting taxes and actively evading taxes, and in a felonious way. I mean, they are tax felons, but because the statute of limitations had expired, all of that stuff just goes now reported in the New York Times, and there's no legal action taken. But more to the point of our conversation, it is pushed aside
by the next thing
almost immediately. It was a huge front-page investigation.
Yeah, and it's very important. All you can hope is that people did read it and it's in their consciousness. Are we still talking about it as much? No, we're not. You know, it is out there, but it just gets buried.
But in that spirit, if the press was in some way more dogged about certain things like, Sarah, why won't the president release his taxes? I mean, why that's not a question in every press conference. Of course, she would stop. But if you guys spread it around so that she didn't know where it was coming up, it would be a little whack-a-mole-ish. But she would probably say, look, I've answered that question before. And I mean, it would be one of those questions that I would be angry that they kept asking, maybe. I don't know. So to be fair, maybe that's the reason. But you see what I'm saying? It's a huge
I don't know if we would ask Sarah that. But I mean, I think, when Margaret Brennan gets an opportunity to sit down during the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
You
can ask the president.
Why not ask him the basic question? Because there's a lot of people who don't watch the news watching the Super Bowl.
Right.
You don't have to ask him the latest thing. You can ask him point blank, why do you lie to the American people every day?
Well, again, Jim, I don't think that's just an incendiary question. It's not going to get any fact out of it.
I would ask him, I would say, the Washington Post tracks lies. They report that you lie 6 times a day to the American people. Why is that a good strategy? Do you think that's working? You see in the polls that 30% of the American people believe you and 70% do not. So how's that working for you? You can ask questions like that.
Yeah, but Jim,
and that's going to get a response from Trump.
Just to push back on you a little bit on that, I mean, I think it has a predictable answer, and that is, look, the Washington Post is a left-wing organization. Jeff Bezos has had it out for me since I started this presidency, and all of the people he's hired have had it out for me as well. And because of their success of the Washington Post, and you in the mainstream media, with all respect, he would say, the American people who don't believe me are believing you, that I'm lying. But I'm not actually lying. That's what he's going to say, or some version of that.
That's fine.
And look, maybe that's fine. And as you say,
get an answer.
It's right. Okay.
You heard from Trump himself what his answer is.
Fair enough.
I don't care what his answer is, but we need to hear his answer. We need to hear his answer again, as you point out. I would ask him again. You told us during the campaign that you would release your tax returns. This audit has gone on forever. There's no law against you releasing them when there is an audit. Why have you not? What are you hiding something in those tax returns?
I love that question.
People think.
Yeah.
I think that's a fair question, and especially, should it be asked at a briefing? She's just going to dismiss it. But if you've got a one-on-one interview, especially in a place that is going to have viewers that don't normally watch news, that's a question to ask, in my opinion.
Yeah, those one-on-ones. You're right. That was a great opportunity missed. I didn't think we learned anything from that exchange with the president that she did. Last thing I would say, or would want to know, is, just because we are back to the president, there's a lot of the press corps, there's a premium on sources and there's a premium on access, and that extends all the way up to the president. So, if you rough him up too much, then you end up in this category of someone like, what's his name, the CNN...
Jim Acosta. I get his emails all the time because the people think it's me and not Jim Avila, Jim Acosta. Wow. We're all alike. So yeah, people on Twitter yell at me and I wasn't there.
I have to say,
and he's a friend of mine. So,
and I'm sorry, he's your friend. Glad he's your friend, but I have to say, I thought he really, again, succumbed to the theater a little bit too much. And I don't even remember the exact X's and O's of that situation, but I remember thinking, dude, I think you're now showboating a little bit. I know he's your friend, so I'm not going to ask you to comment, but I'm just saying that I think the press, they have trouble resisting those showboat moments sometimes as well.
I will defend Jim, and not only because he's a friend, okay, but President Trump was looking for a fight. He was trying to divert the attention of the American public because there was a current scandal going on. It was when Michael Cohen was pleaded guilty and said the president was involved. So there were questions about that. Jim tried to ask one. By causing that diversion, it diverted again the public. Did Jim fall into the trap? You might say he fell into the trap a bit, but he didn't do anything physical whatsoever. That was baloney. That was pure BS. He was pulling away from the lady and not pushing her in any way, and they edited the tape to make it try to look like he did.
Yeah, that was really gross that they would do that.
Right, Breitbart did that. So, he's become the focus of their attention and built up as a straw man. But and there are some in the press, in the White House press corps, who don't agree with the way Jim does his job. I do, and if I was still there, I would probably be doing the job pretty much the same way. And I don't think Dan Rather showboated when he was doing stuff, and I don't think Sam Donaldson showboated when he used to yell at President Reagan to try to be heard. Did it bring them attention? Did it bring them fame? Probably. But they were serving the American people. And I believe that Jim's questions, if you listen to the questions, serve the American people. He asks very direct questions that a lot of them want to know. Questions like you and I have just been talking about. He's in a very visible place. He's the chief correspondent, White House correspondent for CNN, the president's enemy. So, he's in a difficult situation. And I know Jim Acosta very well from my 4 years at the White House. He is a patriotic, second-generation Cuban-American whose family was Republican. They're Cuban-Americans. He loves the country, and he loves the freedom of the press, and that's what he's fighting for. And I would stick up for you just like I stuck up for him.
No, I think you make good points. It seems as though, look, the thing about news generally and the thing about storytelling of any kind and passing along information of any kind is that it has to be presented in a certain way. Sometimes you'll listen to me on this show because you like the way I present something. Sometimes you won't listen to me on the show because you like the way somebody else presents it better or whatever. I mean, similarly with the newscasts. You watch Good Morning America because you like the way they talk about the news or the way they present it. And so there's a presentational aspect of everything. And even the press is not just spilling out words onto the screen. That's a person there who's got inflection and presentation and prioritizes certain pieces of information within the overall story. And so I get it. There's a bit of what I'm getting to of theater with a small t in just presenting the news.
With everybody, sure.
Exactly.
I mean, there are three parts of news as a reporter. There's the gathering of information, there's the writing, the storytelling, and there's the presentation. And you have to be good at all three. And, some are more dramatic. I mean, I can't remember the guy's name on CNBC, it's not Santorum, the other guy. He's at one of the markets. And he's sort of from the right, and he yells and screams, and people love him. Is he theater? Absolutely, he's theater. Theater is part of it. Attracting an audience is part of it. I don't think Jim Acosta in his presentation is really a dramatic guy. He's not.
Right.
But he is first to call out the administration when they do something devious, and that makes him a target.
It seems like the evening newscasts and a lot of the television shows, morning and evening, they have to integrate YouTube videos, and they've integrated, whenever a car hits a tree or a street light, and then there's another van that slides into it in Detroit, that's making the evening newscast. I mean, it seems like they don't report that just down the road, Flint, Michigan still doesn't have clean water. But look what's happening in Detroit. They're slipping and sliding with this latest midwinter storm because there are pictures associated with that. And I guess as a viewer, that's going, wow, look at that. That was really something. That's a real battle for television particularly.
Sure it is. Like I said, it's always been a battle between news they need to know and news they want to know. And now, especially with the internet, we're competing with YouTube videos, which some people just go on and watch videos all day long. They sit there for hours. So these quote-unquote viral videos are put on the evening newscast. Do I like it? No, I don't like it. Do I understand why they're doing it? Absolutely. Your listeners may not know, but there are minute-by-minute ratings. So
you can tell me how well that YouTube...
You can tell in a half-hour broadcast what people were tuning into and what they were tuning away from. And if people weren't wanting to watch cars crashing into each other on a freeway, they wouldn't be on. That's why they're on. People are tuning in for it. The key is to try to make it. And what ABC has done is they have a thing called the Digest, which is a short segment. I think it's maybe a minute and a half long out of their 18-minute news hole. Not at the top of the broadcast, but after the first 15 minutes, where they put those items in. Here's this, here's that. Very quick showing of the videos and moving on. We're not PBS, okay? We're ABC, and we're competing for audience successfully. They're competing for audience at World News. They're the number one broadcast. So it's hard to, even for us old-fashioned stick-in-the-mud journalists, to call up the bosses and say, hey, you shouldn't do that. They say, what do you mean we shouldn't do that? We're number one. Right.
Yeah. There has to be some mix, and you're saying that at least they've made a compartment for it,
right? So
you're going to get it, but it's not dominating the show.
Right. There's a fashion section in the New York Times.
Sure.
The difference being they have a lot of room, more room than we do. That's the only problem.
Jim Avila, before I let you go, listeners should know you were flirting with a really serious fate if you didn't get a kidney transplant.
Yeah. I've been off work for a year. I go back in March. Looking forward to it. Healthy again. My brother Jay donated his kidney. I had the operation in April.
How does that work? Do they look through the family first, or?
Yeah. Well, first the family has to volunteer. I was very lucky. It made my heart full that my brother, my sister, all three of my children, my ex-wife, all volunteered and were tested. I had blood tests, and
does the blood has to match? Meaning the blood
it doesn't
type has
have to match, but the closest match you get is the better. That's why siblings are always the best. That's why Jay, my brother, who's a reporter in San Antonio, was the best match, and he came here to Los Angeles and went to Cedars with me and had a major operation. Yeah. That always stuns me.
Yeah, you're saying he volunteered to have this really traumatic thing done to him.
Yeah, he had an operation where they took his kidney out, and it was a 4-hour operation. This is not you're going in for an appendix or, anything like that. This is a big deal. He has 3 kids of his own, and, he's the real hero in all this. I thank him constantly. We joke because in the last few months I've been healthy enough to do some traveling, and he says his kidney's having the best time of his life. Now that his kidney finally gets to travel all over the world. But
yeah, but you're right. It was a huge sacrifice.
It was a huge sacrifice. Yeah. And without him, I was weeks from a hospice because I did not want to do dialysis. I didn't want to live that life. So if it would not have worked and we would not have gotten it soon enough, that would have been it. And people need to, I should advocate, and I do what I try to advocate. People should volunteer and donate their kidneys for when they die, or even before, if we're friends or relatives, because the list. So if I didn't have family who was willing to do it, it could take up to 10 years. I was not going to live 10 years on dialysis or anything like that. I was just not going to do it.
They put you on a list the same way people end up on a list to become immigrants who are now citizens.
It may be a little easier to get a kidney, but
but really it could take years and years.
Take years and years, and people who have to go that route frequently have to stay on dialysis, which is 3 hours a day sitting in a room having your blood drained and cleaned. It's just horrendous.
And you feel, apparently, this is what I didn't realize, because I actually looked into this after you had told me I'm not going to go through it. I'm thinking, really? You don't want to go? What's the big deal? So you sit there for 3 hours on Twitter. But no, your body is feeling awful a lot of the time.
Yeah, it's like doing chemotherapy practically. I mean, it's not a good life. And I understand people who want to live no matter what. I get it. That's not me.
It just wasn't for you.
It's part of the problem is that I've lived life at such a high level that I'm used to it, and I'm at an age now that either I can continue to live at that great high level or not, and I'd rather not. So I like my life, and I'm back to it. I'm pretty much. I mean, there were some recovery issues that took a little longer than normal, but now I'm perfectly healthy, feeling good.
That's just great.
And I'll go back to work in March. So ABC, I have to say, I'm not always the first guy to say ABC is great, but they have been wonderful to me, full benefits, full everything. I haven't lost anything, and they've taken care of me, and they will welcome me back in March.
Well, we can't wait to see you back on the air, too. So, Jim Avila, thanks a lot, man.
Sure.
Hope you enjoyed our conversation with Jim Avila, wherever you are, wherever you listen, and however you listen. Again, thank you. Until next time, bye-bye.
I want to thank you for supporting Mark Thompson here on The Edge. Fantastic show with all the jokes and, the commentary and the politics and the bullshit. I love it. You can listen to the show on iTunes or Stitcher, or you can just go to the damn website, edge-show.com. Stupid. Why is there a dash?
edge-show.com.